Thank you for being here. This is going to be a good, fast hour. We have an hour, but while I will be conducting the interview with our distinguished guest, I'm going to leave plenty of time for you to ask questions. But if you don't have any, I can take up the hour, I guarantee you. But we're going to ask, because they are recording this, if you have questions, we're going to ask that you go to this microphone and just pose it so that we can get you on camera. And if you're camera shy, we may make some accommodations, but I'll have to then repeat the question. That takes up time, so feel free to do that. Let me introduce, to my immediate left is Reverend Earl Allen. And you're going to learn a lot more about him, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing him, but he's a teacher, a writer, a lecturer, a minister, of course, and he also, as I understand, is founder and CEO of Miracle Publications International Incorporated, a Houston-based Christian education firm. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
And next to him is Clarence Broadnax. And I'll tell you in a minute how these two lives intersected 40 years ago, right here in Dallas, Texas. Clarence grew up in Karnak, Texas, came to Dallas a little later. Also, I understand, Clarence, you became a hairstylist, one of the first for Neiman Marcus and was it Sanger Harris?
Right, correct.
Oh my goodness! So history in the making. But
didn't help himself, did it?
Okay, so you can tell, and we're just going to have a conversation now. Y'all are eavesdropping here on us, but I'm so excited about these gentlemen because what they did affected my life. We're here to talk about the Piccadilly cafeteria, but before I get to that, you were both born in Texas, right?
Yes, I was born in Houston, Texas.
You were born in Houston, and you were born where?
Dallas, Texas.
In Dallas.
Right.
Then both of you left.
Correct.
Where did you go to, Clarence?
I moved to Karnak.
You moved to Karnak.
Where is it?
And anyway, where is Karnak? It's East Texas.
Karnak's in East Texas. It's north of Marshall, Texas, northeast of Marshall, Texas. Around the areas of Caddo Lake. If most of you all don't know where Caddo Lake is.
Yeah. And Reverend Allen, you went out of state.
Went to California and stayed there for a number of years, and I came back to Houston, enrolled in Texas Southern, intended to go to law school, and somewhere along the way, I ended up being a preacher. Yeah.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah, that's what I said.
but what intrigued me about your stories as I read about you is that when you came to Dallas, even though you had grown up in East Texas, you had grown up in California, so maybe you had a little different. You were both shocked at what you found in Dallas.
Right.
What was so shocking about Dallas, Clarence?
Well, as Reverend Allen just stated too, I had to leave and move to California too shortly thereafterwards. And I was just listening to him. When I first moved to Dallas, I enrolled into El Centro Junior College in law school. And so in riding a bus to town, being called out of names, go to the back of the bus to sit down. And I had faced it only once, and that was in Karnak. I was going to the state fair. My father was taking us as a family to the fair. And not knowing, I just jumped on the bus and took the first seat. And he told me I had to get up and go to the back. And I looked, and so I said, why? He said, just get up and go to the back. And so my daddy called me and told me to come on back. And so I did. I followed his instructions. My dad sat there with big tears in his eyes. And that's when I first went into my first case of racial discrimination. And I moved to Dallas, and I ran into all kinds of racial discrimination.
Reverend Allen, here you are at Southern Methodist University. Everything had to be all right there. That's a Christian school, isn't it?
Well, unfortunately, it was not. That's probably one of the biggest hypocritical institutions at that time that we had in Dallas. Because it was a Methodist school, training Methodist preachers. I happened to be one that was being trained, and the most glaring thing, I think, initially was the fact that my wife was pregnant when she came to Dallas. And she had been referred to a doctor here in Dallas by her doctor.
Now, your wife wasn't staying with you because you were in the single dorm for the first semester, right?
Single dorm, and that's another story. in which we could be here all night talking about
I
so I'll just give the highlights of this one. And the doctor, we took her to the doctor. She went in. I stayed in the car with our youngest son at the time. And 30 minutes later, she comes out with a long face, and then the doctor comes out with a long face, and he walks up to the car and says, Reverend Allen, he said, I'm so sorry. He said, but I won't be able to treat your wife. I said, well, why not? He says, well, I work out of Methodist Hospital, and unfortunately, Methodist Hospital do not accept colored. That was the word, colored folk at this time. I said, what? I said, it's a Methodist hospital? I'm going to a Methodist school? I'm studying to be a Methodist preacher? And they won't accept me. He said, well, no, I'm just sorry. So I'm going to have to refer her to someone else who could work out of Parkland. That's the only place she could go at the time. Is the name Parkland?
Yeah.
Parkland Hospital. And boy, I hit the signal. I said, what? I cannot believe this. So that was the beginning of my activities of really getting upset with the system. At the time, that was the largest Baptist, largest Methodist, largest Presbyterian, largest Christian church in the state, in the country. All these, Dallas had the reputation of being the Bible Belt,
the church capital of the world.
That's right. Churches all over the place, and not one of them was integrated. Not one of them would allow a black worshiper to attend their services at that time.
But when you got to SMU, you did have a white roommate, didn't you?
Had a white roommate who was from Orange, Texas, and 3 weeks after we were in school, we started going back and forth to Houston. We'd ride the train to Houston. He'd get off the train and we'd go to Orange, and then we'd meet back up on Mondays and come back to school. Well, after about 3 weeks, this went on, and I was there that Monday evening, and he didn't show up. And I waited around for a while, he didn't show. So I went on back to school, and then about 2 days later, he came in, one Wednesday he came in, and very distraught, started packing. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I'm not gonna stay in school. I said, not staying, what's to happen? He said, well, my daddy found out that I was living with you. He got very upset. And he's a big wheel in the Methodist Church, so he called the bishop, and the bishop called the dean and said, what are we doing down there? And we better get that straightened out. So I have to move, and I just decided I'm not going to go to school. I don't want to be a preacher. If this is what's going on, I want to be. So the dean calls us into his office, calls me, Stu, and two other gentlemen. There were two older men, one white and one black. They were sharing a room. They never shared it at the same time. They commuted. So one day a week, the black was in the room. The next day, the white guy was in the room. And so the dean suggested that we switch around, that I agree to go stay in the room with the black fella, and the other guy, Stu, stayed with the white boy. And I looked at the dean and I said, now, Dean, you must be out of your mind. Why would I agree to something like that? And I'm surprised that you would even offer that to me. I said, I'm here on full scholarship, but if you want to have your scholarship, you can have it. If I have to go back home, I'll go back home before I agree to that. So I just walked on out of his office.
Now, the two of you already impressed me at even a very young age. Mm-hmm. You were already defiant.
Yeah.
Am I putting words in? Clarence, am I
That's putting it mildly.
You weren't ready to take anything from the, which raises the question. But first, Clarence, let me ask you, because you came here and you were joining the Air Force, weren't you?
That's correct.
Tell me about the day you joined the Air Force.
I had just left the draft board and was coming out Commerce that evening about 6 o'clock, and I stopped at this restaurant, Piccadilly's, on Commerce.
Okay, now before you go on, for people who don't know what Piccadilly is, Piccadilly was a pretty popular cafeteria, not only in Dallas, but
it's a chain.
in every major city in Texas. I know in Fort Worth, Houston, Austin. Okay.
It was one of your major restaurants, and at lunch it was crowded all the way around the corner. People just waiting to get in, and it was never my greatest desire to eat there. But that particular day, I was passing by and I thought about it. I said, "Man, must be good food in there." So I decided to go in and have myself a meal, and I got in the line. And when I got just about from here to that young lady there, to the food service counter, this guy came from behind the counter and told me, he said, listen, get out of here. We don't serve niggers here. I said, well, I ain't no nigger. I told him just like that. And so he said, well, you getting out of here. I said, not today. I'll be here until you start serving black people and black men like me.
About what time of day was this?
It's about 6:30 in the evening, 6:30, 7:30 in the evening.
So how long did you stay there before somebody came and got you?
Oh, I guess about less than 30 minutes. I was whole Dallas Police Department there. And they had accused me of violating the law. And so I explained to them that they apparently was not familiar with the new Civil Rights Act bill that was passed and the new laws.
This was 1964.
1964. And he said, well, you got to get out of here. I said, I ain't going no place. And I had some papers there that I had to fill out to take back to the draft board.
You got your draft papers in your hand.
Right, and I pointed them out to him. And I stated to him that he think that I would go into a military to fight for a country that I can't sit down and have a decent meal. So he says, well, you're going to jail. I said, well, I ain't just going to walk out here and go to jail. You have to take me. So they picked me up, and took me out, threw me in the back of a paddy wagon, took me to jail. We got down to City Hall, and there was two guys, I could call their name, I never will forget them. And these two guys had me sitting there in this big chair, and there was several other officers over there. And one of them approached me with his gun in his hand. And he told me, he said, this is what we do for the N-word again, like you. That's your upper class brass. And as if I was to fear. And I just politely looked at him. I told him, I said, you know, those guns are not to be played with. And so,
wait a minute, you're sitting in Dallas City Hall.
Dallas Police Department City Hall.
The year after they killed Kennedy.
Exactly.
Talking back to somebody holding
but let
a gun.
me tell you some more. And they had already told the Reverend Allen and I that what we were doing was trying to embarrass Dallas. I said, well, it don't take much to embarrass.
Yeah, they were.
But Reverend Allen, speak to this before we go on with your story, because I want to get to the next day. I pointed out that you two came here defiant. Where are all the other black folk?
Well, as I said earlier, they knew their place. Back then, that was a phrase, that, if you stay in your place, you'll be all right. And I'll give you an example. When I came to Dallas, I met a preacher, big preacher. When I said big, he had a very important.
And you're not going to name him?
No, won't name him.
I just had to ask that. I knew you wouldn't.
I don't want to do that. But in any event, I'll tell you what he did. When he first met me, he started calling me Ludwig. He said, well, you look like one of those German scholars, and so on. I said, okay. So one day I was with him, and he said, come on, Ludwig, let's go down there. He took me to the bank, big bank, I don't know which bank, downtown here, one of the banks. And when he walked in, everybody knew him, hey, everybody knew him, he knew everybody, he was very big, happy-go-lucky. So the president of the bank happened to be standing in the door of his office. He said, come on in, he said, come on, Ludwig. So he goes into the president's office, and he began to talk. They must have talked about 15, 20 minutes. I'm just standing there listening. Talk about all kinds of stuff. When he left, he says, come on, Ludwig, I got to go to the restroom. So he goes down in the basement. I said, where are we going? He said, I'm going to the restroom. I said, why are we going to the basement? We walked by several upstairs. He said, oh, no, I mean, and he used the restroom and came on out. And I said, well, why did you do that? He said, boy, don't you know who we are? I said, no, who are we? He said, we colored folk. We know our place, and we stay in our place. I mean, I was alarmed. Here he is in the president's office for 20 minutes. They're dear friends. But when he has to use the restroom, he has to go down in the basement where, obviously the janitors and so on were down there. And he used the same restroom they used.
Okay, so that's how Dallas was.
That's how Dallas was.
And here was a man trying to get a meal and is taken to jail. Did you spend the night in jail that night?
No. After they found out that I wasn't afraid, and so they decided to let me go. And when they did, I just came that little long aisle where Oswald supposedly did his thing. I came right back out of there, went right back downside, out to Commerce, and went right back to Piccadilly's.
See, he was one of those folk that they
tell him what he is.
Called back in. He's one of those uppity niggas that was crazy. They said, leave him alone, because he's crazy. They said, to do what he did, that's the only way they could describe us.
But they did leave you alone because you.
I went back and they came right back, picked me up, took me right back to jail. So they held me there until the restaurant closed. And so by then, I catch the bus to go home, and I'm already teed off. Now I got to go to the back of the bus. You know,
it was horrible.
But you got in touch, or somebody got in touch with you? Was it
Miss Kraft? She called me.
It's Juanita Kraft.
Well, the press showed up too, and that night, 10 o'clock news, they made a little short announcement about it. And then Miss Juanita Kraft, she was the NAACP then, president here in Dallas, and she gave me a call. But I had several calls that next morning from CORE, several different organizations, and I think he was kind of surprised. And I was too, because that next morning, there were a line of us down there.
You know, we didn't know. I didn't know at the time that they were taking the pictures. And I'm not sure who this person is. Do you know, Clarence, who that is?
Well, he could have been anybody. They had some of it. Yeah. FBI, I found that they were there.
Yeah.
Let's see the next one, because I think at one point they actually serve you with papers or something.
Yeah, that's when they were serving those.
They were serving some papers. I don't know, what was those papers about?
That was a $250,000 injunction. Piccadilly had served that one, and the Black Ministerials Allowance served another one later that evening on us.
Wait, the black preachers, the black ministers sued you as well?
Yeah. We brought Martin Luther King Jr. here during that period of time. Dr. King.
Yeah.
And the black preachers boycotted it. They didn't want to have anything to do with King.
So in addition to being sued by Piccadilly, you also got sued by the black preachers.
Exactly.
They thought this was their phrase. They're going to set us back 50 years, set us back. We were already back. No, really, I mean, it's just unheard of. And this was not just in Dallas, across the South. I mean, black preachers, you know, had serious problems with Dr. King. Now they all want to rally around the name, you know, and get in the limelight. But back then, they didn't want to touch him.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Clarence, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Another problem was with that, they they never cared. Reverend called him Reverend Wright. Sorry.
I guess back then I was
Reverend Allen. Reverend Allen, when they were serving these papers in the Black Ministerials Allowance, they wanted to call a conference with us, right? And so what they wanted to talk about, I found out later, was that they had gone downtown to the white establishment and had told them, they had sent them back to us to say, y'all go out there and y'all need to take care of them boys out there for us. And use those words, I know what they used. And so they shagged around and said that, well, y'all creating too big a problem. We'll take care of this. It's just a matter of time. It's been sitting here this long, hasn't been taken care of. And so they was looking for us to come off. And so we just ignored the fact that they had mentioned it to us and kept right on about our business, picking in restaurants. And see, there was another place downtown that I just want to throw this one in too, because it was about as bad as Piccadilly's. During lunch hours and early in the morning, a lot of people went to a five and dime store with H.L. Green.
H.L. Green.
H.L. Green.
And you had to go to the basement. Had to go to the basement. And that would just break my heart, but all my friends would meet down there, and I just had to go. I couldn't help it. So one day at lunch, I said, I ain't going to the basement today. I'm staying upstairs. I looked up, the group was there. We all were upstairs.
And Reverend Allen, just to go back some, I mean, even while you were at SMU, there was a drugstore across the street that you were acting up even then.
Well, I don't know about acting up, but
well, I mean,
we were there.
That's what I meant.
My dear friend, I just met him again this evening from way back then. It's Carol Brown. He was a big white troublemaker. And
wave your hand, Mr. Brown, so we can see you back there.
He was even from a town called White, Texas. I said, well, why is it called White? He said, ain't no colored folk there. But anyway, one night, we were students at SMU. One night, he decided to go to get something out of the drugstore, and he says, I'm going to go and get a cup of coffee, da-da-da-da-da. And so he left me in the car, and it was raining, strongly. And then I signed it. I said, I'm going in too. So I went in and sat next to him and ordered a cup of coffee. There was a little black lady behind the counter. She brought me my coffee. And we heard this screaming across the store there, you can't share, you can't. He ran over there, and he says, we can't serve that coffee. I said, why you can't serve it? This little black lady, she just screaming, and she didn't know what to do. She'd serve the coffee, and he's screaming at her. So we said, well, we're not going anywhere. So about a few minutes later, Carol said, let's go to the campus and get some more students. So this is on I think it was Friday night, Saturday night, something? Saturday night. And, most of the students have gone away, but somehow or another we corralled up maybe about 30 or 40 of them, and we went back to the drugstore. We sat there, and someone called Mr. Bright. He was away at the time. He come booming and storming in there. He said, get this nigga out of here. What? I mean, I worked hard for this drugstore, and you gonna bring a nigga up in there? Get him out of here. And for some reason, the police chief showed up. And he says, well, Mr. Bright, I mean, as long as you're open to the public, then unless they're violating some law or something, we can't run anybody out of here. He said, if you don't get him out here, I'm going to get him out of here. His son said, now, Dad, let's slow down. Mr. Bright says, look, I worked too hard for this. I ain't going to let no nigga come in here. And if you don't take him out, he's going to take him out. I'm going to get him out here foot first. That was, So Friday they closed the store down. He said, well, if you close the store down, then it'll leave. So next day, Monday, by that time, the word had got around the campus. We had a bunch of students out there, walking around. So finally, he came out to me, and for someone that told him my name, he said, he called me Alan. Alan? He says, I understand now why you're doing this. In fact, I probably would do the same thing. He said, well, you know what? I do not understand what these damn white kids out here doing. They don't have to do that. That's what made me so mad. I don't know why they out there picketing for you. But that's the way Dallas was. Let me give you a little quickie.
Yes.
The dean of the school was from Georgia. He had a big white hair. Name was Dean Quillian. I don't know, I was in his office one day for something. He said, Earl, I just saw this movie. I said, what movie? He said, Raging in the Sun. It's a powerful movie. He said, have you seen it? I said, no, it hadn't come to the color theaters yet. He looked at me, changed the subject. Because it was, it was obvious even the theaters were segregated.
Right, and as a rule, the films, even if they were black films, didn't get to the black theaters until it was a month or so late.
They had a theater down Majestic. They had what they call crow's necks or something.
Right. Yeah.
We could go upstairs and way up the stairs in the nosebleed seat.
It's a performing arts center now. We've renovated it, and everybody can go now.
But see, the thing that was so bad. See, the thing that was so bad about it is that black folk accepted that.
Of course they did.
They just, they had no problems with it.
But let me quickly go back to this and sort of wrap this story up. And folk, if you have questions, please feel free to go to the microphone now, and I'll start taking your questions. Can we see another slide here in just a minute? Go ahead.
If you think that those are a lot of pictures there, I could go home, and this is how harassed I was. I could go home and look, and there would be police sit down the streets with cameras. I would go home, and at night, my family and I would be there. They would come by, throw dummies in my yard with ketchup on it, sit on the fire, Martin Luther King wrote on it. This is how. And then some people will say, well, why are you all doing this? But, you would have to have lived in these conditions and knew that they exist. That was a remark that was made to one of the presidential young ladies, I use that word, and by another minister, and they held one of the other runners responsible for what he said. And he was saying that the reason why you can say this is because you never experienced it, because you've never been born black, and that's just a fact. And they want to hold him responsible for that. So you would have to know and to be walking these shoes in order to see and feel the way I feel.
But what gave the two of you the fortitude? I mean, to have it? I mean, you got out there in California, you got a little mixed up, so maybe that's you. But when I think of East Texas, I think of accommodation there too. I mean, how did you come out of East Texas with
that? That's a mistake to think that California didn't have problems.
Okay, well, tell me about it.
It still has problems today.
Yes, I agree.
Black folk are viewed by others wherever they are. Whether you're in New York City, Chicago, Detroit, wherever. If you're black, you're going to have some distinctions made and not going to be favorable. Give an example of Dallas here. One Saturday night, I got a call from the police department. He said, Reverend Allen, we want to advise you that we've had several death threats, and we advise you not to go to church tomorrow in the pulpit because we don't know what will happen. I said, what do you mean don't go to? He said, I'm going. He said, we advise you not to go. So that Sunday morning, I went to church. It had police cars all around the church to see what was going to happen. And I went and preached and did all the things we were supposed to do and came back home. Nothing happened. But that's the type of atmosphere that you lived in, where you'd get these death threats. And you never knew from one moment to the next. But for some reason, and to this day I can't explain it, it was something supernatural. It had to be, because we didn't have any fear.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, where did you get it from? Can you trace it to anything or anybody?
God, God, because today when you look back on it, you say, man, did I do that? Yeah. That was stupid. But we didn't have any fear at that time. As he said, they had the gun at his head. Any fear. I mean, that was perhaps the most distinguishing thing about that time, is that there was no fear. Now that was just, here again, a handful of us, because most of the blacks in Dallas, as any other place, I mean, they were docile. They stayed in that place, and they thought we were crazy. They thought we were making things worse for them, and so on. So they did not support us. They were afraid. And understandably so, because there had been a lot of brutalization and sort of things that had happened to them, and we could understand it. I don't condemn them, but it's just that it wasn't very many of us at the time.
And one thing too, I mean, you guys actually planned to go to jail.
Oh yeah.
Sometime. I mean, aside from you going to jail that first time, you went to jail some more, didn't you?
We knew we were going to.
We decided who was going to go to jail.
And you mentioned California. See, I had to. It got so rough there for a while. I was talking to his son. I finally had to get my heels to click it and leave Texas and move to California. And I went up there and I stayed for about 12 years. And at that particular time, I found out that California, in some cases, they had all of that little hidden cell racism too. And they were vicious about it. Mm-hmm. You had the Black Panther Party there and other militant organizations there, and they would stop these guys in the street and shoot them down like they were dogs. And that's how they eliminated those parties, different organizations. So then and there, I began to realize that the chances that we were taking in the Deep South too, they talking about chances. We took some chances, but you ask me why, I don't know. I can't answer that, but
none answerable.
I knew that if my brothers could die in the rice paddies in Vietnam and throughout the world for the rights of you and I and for America, then I shouldn't have any fear to die in the ghettos and in the towns of America.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, well, let's go to questions. Or if you have comments that you'd like to make. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sanders, I actually have 4 questions. I'd like to put them on the record, and if there's the opportunity for them to be answered, I would be grateful.
Okay, if you could do that quickly, and we'll see, because we don't give everybody a chance.
Understandably.
Yes.
My first question is, how did the breakthrough come? My second question, who were the participants, the people who were in line? How did you get those folk? How did you get them organized? Where were your meetings? And finally, my fourth question is, was it all of the black ministers in Dallas who rejected what was going on, or was it the IMA?
Was it which one?
The Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance.
Okay.
Headed by the person whom we will not name.
Mm-hmm.
but you obviously know. Okay. I mean, I think you can answer those. I mean, who were some of the others who were involved? I mean, you said they were from CORE. CORE, by the way, is the Congress on Racial Equality. I think we should point that out for you young people who may not know.
You saw him on the picture there. Ted Armstrong was one of them. Another one was Reverend Bethel. Another one was a young man by Young. Someone here in Dallas, the state legislator, Terry Hodge. Terry was very active at that time. And it's just good to see her going on with her, but she was very active.
Okay. And was there a special place where you met to plan?
Yeah, I was about to answer that question. We couldn't meet at the same places all the time. We had to change different locations, but we would always meet somewhere in the South Dallas area. Over on at that time it was Forest Avenue. Now it's Martin Luther King, and we would meet a lot at Reverend Wright's church a lot of times. So
he's messing with you.
He's in that delivery.
Reverend Allen's church, which is on Barneyview and Stuart Simpson.
In the not all of the pastors in the city, but most of them, and most of them agreed, but they would not agree to the extent where they would publicly agree with what we were doing. And that made it difficult because very few of them, as I said, I could count on my best a handful who actually would identify with us.
And another thing is when I said the Black Ministerial Alliance, if you want to do some research on them, you'll know who they are because, you know, I could call names, but all you got to do is go back there and do some. Right. Well, then you know exactly who we're talking about.
There was an organization that was called the Dallas Citizen Council.
Yeah.
You know, that was the counterpart.
Originally the white Dallas Citizens
Council.
That's what I was going to say, the white Dallas.
That's what it was called. And the Civil Rights Act had passed. And that was the real impetus for us getting started, although Dallas was late in implementing it.
And briefly, what broke the back of Piccadilly?
What broke the back was always is economics. When you hit somebody in the pocket where it hurts at, that breaks the back. That's the backbone there. When we picket all these places, business was dropped off phenomenally. And Piccadilly's, I told him, I said, you'll either serve blacks or you'll be out of business.
Okay, now
he's out of business.
Pocketbooks.
And it went for 28 days. Did you go back? Reverend Allen said he never went back. Did you go back that next day?
I went back once. Yeah.
They told me the food wasn't very good anyway, so
yeah, I went back once. Yeah.
First of all, I want to say thank you. My name is Olenka. Because of you guys, I read a book called The Accommodation by a writer here. And
Jim Schutz.
Yeah, I read that. And I guess like when you was asking the question about how did they know, I knew when I was 8. Nobody had to tell me. I knew at 8 that it was something that was supposed to be done. I don't know if it was up at night when KKDA, my Dr. Martin Luther King speech would come on and Malcolm X's speech would come on before the radio went off. It was just something in me that knew.
Yeah.
And I started when I was 16 doing activities out in West Dallas with the LED program. And then when I got old, I joined the New Black Panther Party here in Dallas. But I just want to say I thank you guys because I didn't know. I knew about the Piccadilly, but I didn't know who.
Yeah.
And I just want to say I don't have a lot of questions. I just want to say thank you.
Amen.
Because it's very important when you can meet your elders, those that came before you, and listen to the strategies that you laid out, the tenacity that you laid out. Because y'all guys were doing some stuff. I'm serious. Y'all were doing things. I mean, you know, you laid a foundation. And just today I was watching the news. Some black people out in Frisco, they living in an apartment. Somebody came and put Confederate flags on their doors. And this lady said, in my 27 years, I would have never thought about that somebody would still put Confederate flags on our doors. Just the other day, they had the anniversary of James Byrd. I would have never thought at my age that I would see a black man drugged behind a truck. But I never thought at my age that I'd see a possibility of a black man being president.
Sure, yeah.
And y'all open up their doors, just small things, so people like me could go to it. Because I remember being a kid, and I'm 39, going down to H.L. Green and wondering why I had to go to the bathroom in the 70s down in the basement. Or why, you know, my mother used to tell me one time, well, you can't stand there and eat a hamburger
But just to be able to be in the room with the same people that open up those doors, and I just want to say thank you, because y'all renewed my faith, because I get tired here in Dallas. I get very, very tired. I get tired of seeing things like the city council losing that power position that we had, you know. And I just want to say thank you, because you've given me an extra boost to my battery.
Amen.
And again, I just say thank you. And if I could shake your hand, that's all I need.
We'll be happy to.
Well, you can come shake his hand right now if you want to.
Yeah. Come right now. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the encouragement.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate y'all so much.
And sir, before you ask your question, I mean, she brought up a point, and we were talking about it before the program started, about how people don't plan. I mean, I see young organizations come up and they hold a press conference that nobody comes to generally, but there's been no plan. Ernie, there's been no strategy. What's going to be the next day? Who's going to go to jail? I mean, nobody's thinking about going to jail. I guarantee you that.
Yeah. You know, I call it grandstanding. They just want to get the pictures, you know, on TV or something like that. But you know,
and as soon as they get the picture, they're gone.
Nothing happens. You know, I'm not familiar with what's going on in Dallas, but I can sense that there's something going on, that black folk are losing whatever they had, or they're not where they ought to be. And am I reading correctly?
You got it.
Yeah, and that ought not be. We ought to be further along than we are if that's going on. But it's going on all over the place. We're moving backwards, not forward. Look at our communities. I mean, some of them are worse now than they were when we were coming.
Exactly.
And that ought not be.
And racism is just as perverted today as it was then.
Well,
it's
see,
just a little bit,
it's a spirit. It's a spiritual thing, and we don't always see that. It's spiritual. I mean, there's a spirit, and spirits don't change. Evil spirits are the same as they were back in Moses' day. You know, they're the same today, and that spirit gets on people, and it divides people. There's a spirit of fear. You know, there's the Israelites, you know, after they got set free, they couldn't handle their freedom, so they wanted to get back into slavery. And that's pretty much what's happening to us now. Some of us can't handle our freedom. Some years ago, a man by the name of Eric Fromm wrote a book called Escape from Freedom. It's about the Germans and the Nazis and so on, and the Jewish people. After they were set free, in a few years, they wanted to get back under, because their lives were very regimented. They didn't have to think much. They just do what, you know, just follow the plan, follow the pattern. And that's where we are to a large extent among blacks. You know, we're just, it's uncomfortable to be free. Because then, you know, you have to get up every day and decide for yourself what to do. Before, under segregation, you didn't have to decide. You knew what to do. You knew your place, and it's just automatic. But now we have to make some decisions, and we don't know how to make those decisions.
Yes, sir.
My name is John Muir. I live in Austin, Texas right now. Came up for this event because I grew up in Dallas and had the opportunity to participate in some of these events. I'd like to mention a friend of mine named the Reverend Bill Oliver.
Bill Oliver? Yes.
He was one of the people who got me involved in these things.
Were you involved in the Piccadilly and anything like that?
Like you, my memories.
Yeah. What is your name now?
John Muir.
John Muir.
Yes. I recognize Ted Armstrong.
You remember Ted? I thought the name looked familiar.
Would you come a little closer to the microphone, please?
I went to church. I took Ted to church at the church that Reverend William B. Oliver was a youth group minister at.
Yes.
On a day that we were supposed to be celebrating racial harmony. Our church wasn't doing that, even though it was a United Church of Christ church.
Yeah.
I'd also like to mention that, as many of y'all know, Mrs. Kraft was a hugely important person. I had the opportunity to participate in NAACP Youth Council and also core events.
Yeah.
My question is, this seems like a rather limited set of surveillance photos, and if there are more, I'd be interested in seeing them. And secondly, if there's any knowledge among y'all or in the audience about not just surveillance photographers, but infiltrators in the movement, I'd be interested in knowing about that.
Yeah.
Okay, I can tell you from what Stephen Fagan told me earlier that there are more photos. We just picked 12 to show you tonight. There's a whole group of them that you have recently seen, I think, and they actually came in another group of photos. They did come with this exhibit necessarily. They came. Well, Stephen, where did they come?
They came from a donation from the Dallas County Sheriff's Department with some Jack Ruby material.
Yeah, they came with the Jack Ruby exhibit. So that's how we were able to get, or the museum was able to get those photos, because they were with the Sheriff's Department and Jack Ruby.
I'd also like to say hello to Ernie McMillan.
Yeah, Ernie's blessing. Ernie, just stand so people can see you. Ernie, I've been covering Ernie all of his life, but Ernie was very much involved in
Ernie picked up the torch and carried it. You know, he was the one voice in Dallas that kept things, you know, on track. And he had a lot of trouble from the powers that be.
And actually went to jail for it.
Went to jail.
We'll tell his story again one day too.
Yeah,
so.
we tell. I mean, I can tell this little quick thing about Ernie. He doesn't know that I know this. When he was quote on the run, he was in New York City. They had some gathering at some house, and I was supposed to be there, Ernie, but something came up, and I had to delay my trip the next day. The night that they raided the place and arrested you and a bunch of other folk. I said, I thank God I wasn't there. But Ernie, it goes way back. He has been a warrior for a long time. Appreciate your contribution too, my man.
Yeah.
Great. Yes, sir. We got time.
I'll make it quick. Good evening.
Good evening.
I wanted to say I admire both of your audacity. I like people that throw a monkey wrench into society and make change. And just really, I loved your smile in there because you knew you were doing something. You know, and so I admire.
He knew it was on camera. That's what it was.
I admire y'all's audacity. My question is, what does it say about race in this country that we're labeling Obama black? He's 50% white. His mother is white, and his father is black. So he belongs just as much to the white community as he does to the black. But yet he's labeled as a black man. And I just want to get your comment.
That goes back to the day when you had one speck of black blood, you were black. You know, if you had any blood in you that was black, you were tainted, you were black. You could be as white as you. In many instances, they were. But if they had black father in instances, they were black. And now, on the other hand, blacks could have a white father, and they were still black.
And I just want you to understand that black people didn't define blackness as he is suggesting. White people defined who was black.
Yeah.
And I used to tell people all the time, you know, and it says, I don't have to tell you that I'm black, even though I'm very proud of it. But I guarantee you that somebody every day will remind me that I am. And Obama's experience has been that people have told him who he was. America defined him. Now,
see, in certain parts of the country, in certain parts of the world, they wouldn't be black. But they couldn't make a mistake about me. No, seriously, you know both of you.
But wouldn't it be more proper to label him as mixed? Like in the media, wouldn't it be more proper not to call him the black candidate, but the mixed candidate?
It would be great if we didn't have to say anything.
Indeed.
But
indeed.
I mean, it would be great if we didn't have to say African American or Black American. But we are not. That's where his point. We haven't made it there.
We're not there yet. In fact, we're going back.
Let me add a little something to that too. You know, we sit here, but we don't have any control over what the press does. The press usually go about their business and print what they want to print. Okay? Now, Obama, he normally, if he were, well, that's a good example is this is the first time I ever heard anybody just pick out a person and just say he's the black president. He's going to be the black president. You know, and we didn't do that. It was the press that did that. And it's the press that's continued to do that. You see?
The irony of that, though, is that when he first got started, black folk said he ain't black enough. You know, they felt that and that's something that he wasn't black enough. So that's I agree with Clarence. A lot of that stuff is carried on.
Thank you.
Anyway,
I just want to join in this young lady and commending the bravery and audacity of Brother Allen and Brother Broadnax, thank you for laying that foundation down and continuing the struggle of our ancestors here. There was one photograph there that I think really hit me hard, and it was the nonverbal expression. I think it's photo number 4, in which you had these 2 white men with their arms folded, and you standing confronting them. To me, it just really revealed the power of nonviolence.
Yeah.
The force, the energy around you, caused them to fold their arms in a defensive position. And it's comparable to somebody beating you over the head. You have to cover your head to protect yourself from the blows. But it was the force, the blows of truth that you represented.
Yeah.
Just that power. And I just want to commend you for taking that stand. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.
That's a great observation.
Yes,
I agree. Well, gentlemen, let me just give you the opportunity to say one last thing, if you have on your mind, and particularly to some of these young people out here. You said where you think we are. Where do you think we're going?
First of all, I'd like to commend the organizers of this, and hope that they will continue to do things like this. People need to know the history, and so we commend you and the others that planned this event. Secondly, where do we go from here? I wish I knew. I'll tell you where we need to go. We need to get more indignant and more committed to changing things. That there is a sense of docility. People are just docile. Apathy. We pretty much like things the way they are. We like to complain about how bad they are, but we don't want to do anything about it. And every step we've made has cost us something. In some instances, cost people's lives. You take voting, for example. Lives were lost, and if you get 30% of the black community to go vote, that's a high percentage. There's just a sense, it's a spirit of apathy. And somewhere or another, we got to do something to stir that pot up, because the only freedom that you'll ever get is the freedom that you fight for. If you don't fight for it, it will not be granted. Power does not acquiesce. You have to use similar power, not necessarily. And as Ernest said, nonviolence is probably the strongest power that we have at our access to. And if we could just begin to take the spirit that we had and just stand up, refuse to sit in the back, refuse to be called a nigger, refuse to allow yourself to be segregated, just refuse to do it. The Bible says if you resist the devil, he will flee. Yes. And so we got to learn how to resist. That's what all we were doing. We were just resisting the devil, because segregation and racism is of the devil. And we were resisting the devil, and we will continue to resist the devil. See, this says old soldiers never die. And we don't retire. Very clear.
Mr. Broadnax?
Again, I would like to thank you all for having us out, and two, hope we can continue this. And I just want to say that as Reverend, he basically said what I want to say too, but we do have an election that's coming up, and some of you all who don't have voters' rights, voters registration cards, be sure and get one. Be sure and go and vote, and be active in your neighborhood and in your church. And for some of us, let's go back to our neighborhood and let's work with our youth. Let's get our youth together. I see young boys walking the street with their pants dropped way down here. See, they couldn't have been in the movement with us because we had to run sometimes.
No.
And with your pants down there, you can't run. You got to get them pants up and get outdoors when the time comes. We had to go. So.
I know at times, but those young men, you see about their pants hanging down, they have nothing. That's the why. You see that? When you talk to them, they'll tell you they have nothing. They don't.
That's why I say let's go back.
She's saying the people you see with the pants down have nothing.
They have
you can go on and answer that. I mean, I had to repeat that because we are taping.
Let me say this. We need somebody in this group. It'd be a shame for you to leave out of here and go back to business as usual. Somebody in the group needs to do something radical, something different, something that people do not expect you to do. You cannot just sit on this type of information and just do nothing. It's not just here to entertain you. It ought to motivate you. You don't have to be black to do something. Carol Brown is a classical example of a white person doing something radical on behalf of black people. Just, make up your mind, say, look, this is enough. We need to take a stand. One person, who has a conviction is a majority. If you're willing to be convicted and committed to doing something, changing things, just do it. There may not be in Mr. Bright restaurants or something like that, but there's something going on. If you go to City Hall and say, hey, enough is enough. I mean, if whatever, go somewhere, do something, at least you do nothing.
Mr. Broadnex, I cut you off. Were you finished, or did you have anything else?
I'm finished.
Okay. I too would thank the museum for sponsoring this, and thank all of you for coming. It's been a great time for me. I enjoyed it. Join me in thanking these great men for being with us.